Welcome to Value-Based Care Insights, brought to you by Lumina Health Partners, an ECG management consultants company. We are a national healthcare consulting firm that is redefining healthcare together with our clients. In this program, we will explore the big trends in healthcare and have real conversations about how provider organizations can meet today's challenges, strengthen performance, and transform care delivery. Value-Based Care Insights is hosted by Daniel Marino, principal at ECG. For additional insights, visit ecgmc.com. Dan, over to you.
Welcome to Value-Based Care Insights. I am your host, Daniel Marino. Well, a couple weeks back, actually in early March, was the HIMSS meeting. I believe it was March 9th through the 12th. And although I didn't go this year, last year I went, and I thought it was fascinating. There, AI was really starting to take off, and I think every vendor that was at HIMSS had AI in either their name or somewhere on their booth and so forth. And last year, if any of our listeners remember, we did a pretty nice overview on sort of the key takeaways of HIMSS and the trends that were coming out of HIMSS that maybe providers needed to focus on. And then based on some of the requests that we've had this year, we thought we would do it again. And although I wasn't there this year, one of my colleagues, actually one of the radio hosts that is on Healthcare Now Radio, was in attendance. So I'd like to introduce Tom Foley. Tom is the host of the AI Shift. He is on Healthcare Now Radio as well as have on-demand podcasts and was at HIMSS and looking forward to kind of hearing your thoughts. Tom, welcome to the program.
Dan, thank you very much. Glad to be here.
So, Tom, give me your thoughts. Last year, as usual, HIMSS had a lot of vendors. There were some great conversations going on. What was your impression of the overall theme of HIMSS? What were some of your big takeaways?
Yeah, first off, I have to say HIMSS was great. It is always great. It's great to have that annual. Sometimes there's people you only see at HIMSS.
Right.
In that context, from a networking perspective, and it was reinvigorating to catch up and chat and really get the lay of the land from other people's perspectives. So, but HIMSS itself, I think to your earlier point, AI was actually naturally a hot topic. If you didn't have AI someplace in your booth, you probably didn't get a lot of attention. But patient empowerment and mobility also, I think, rang through a lot of the messaging, and that's where I focused a lot of my time on the booths that I did go and visit.
Yeah, when last year I had a lot of conversation, interviewed a few people, around AI, and it was just, I kind of see it as its infancy stage, last year, and obviously AI and the whole development of it, use of AI, I mean, is just, has come so far just in the last year. So when you think about it, were there a couple of really key AI elements that you saw in some of the technologies? For instance, AI related to maybe clinical pathways, or last year there was a lot of AI capabilities that were starting to evolve around some of the business processes. Was there a particular area there that really caught your attention?
Yeah, I think AI is definitely coming into the forefront. So when you ask yourself AI, it's a broad
Sure.
term, right? And
Right.
healthcare is huge, right? So to your point, ambient listening might have been the theme of AI last year, right? Or how do I use AI in claims management or X, Y, and Z element of the business? Where I think now AI is now front and center in the context of how do we enhance the delivery of care? And that was exciting because that's really where the greatest challenge is in the
Right.
context of I have we have the market challenges. I can't hire physicians fast enough. There's not enough of them. Can't hire nurses fast enough. There's not enough of them. But I have more sicker patients today than I did yesterday. So AI is a natural platform to bring to the forefront and help solve that problem.
One of the questions I asked a few of the vendors last year was as we start to look at data, how are we going to process data faster to really begin to make sense of it. And to your point, when we start to think about patient risk, when we start to think about how we can aggregate the care maybe more efficiently, that I think everybody agrees that's going to be a huge benefit of artificial intelligence. Did you have a chance to look at the differences between, say, the EHRs, Epic, Cerner, and so forth that are processing all of this data related to clinical workflows? Or was it more that maybe the other third party solution vendors were they more advanced on being able to aggregate some of that data and maybe push it forward in terms of maybe, I don't know, innovative clinical workflows or something in that regard?
It's a great question. And when you talk about AI in and of itself, you have to ask specifically when you talk about being in the clinical forefront, how does AI work in context
Hmm.
of understanding that patient? If I was in an EHR, the context would be what's in the EHR. When we all
Right.
know that no EHR stores 100% of the patient's record, because I have nine. I have five chronic conditions, and I see nine different doctors. So they're not all in the same health system, and they're not all in the same EHR. What I felt was most interesting was the interoperability lab. Now, some folks might say, "Hey, the interoperability lab has been at HIMSS for years, right?" So, but now is the time. If you're going to talk about AI, you got to talk about interoperability,
Sure. Right.
right? And that was really the most interesting part, because I don't take this the wrong way, and I have several friends that work at EHR vendor with the EHR vendors, but I'm not relying on an EHR vendor to solve this problem.
Right.
Um, and so, but if I'm gonna, but now is the time to look at strategically how am I bringing in data from trusted third-party sources. And as we all know, the federal government has this QHIN TEFCA effort, which is good.
Hmm.
But we also have Care Quality out there. We also have Commonwealth out there, and we also have other credible data sources, right? So QHIN hasn't picked up fast enough to me, for me, in the context of how do I leverage that in order to strategically, in order to affect contextualization and personalization of the medical record in
That's
the EHR.
that's what a lot of organizations are struggling with
Yeah,
because there is data all over the place. I think AI is allowing for us to more quickly normalize the data that is coming in. But obviously the data governance around AI or AI governance, is absolutely critical in that. But when you think about how you're going to aggregate that data and incorporate it into the care plan, the care models, what to do with those level of insights. I think organizations are still struggling with that. Providers are still struggling with that. And I
yeah,
think some of it is managing maybe the bias that comes out of it. I think some of it is making sure that we have all of the information that's going to drive the results. Were any of those topics addressed at all? That's a concern by a lot of folks.
yeah. It is definitely a concern, and you're right. There's not one. There's not a silver lining here, right? You have to. There are some good vendors out there that will help aggregate the data, but they still, in and of themselves, don't get it all, right?
Right.
And we still
Yeah.
have some rules around what AIS is versus treatment, and there are still, I hate to say it because there's legal connotations here, but there are still some blockers in the neighborhood,
Sure.
and so we aren't just there yet, and we have to do a better job even of record matching and
Yeah.
things of that nature.
Well, and the
The
output
data,
that comes from it.
yeah, the data is
Understanding.
still dirty,
Yeah.
and but and the data is has proliferated in too many locations to really get to think that you're going to get 100% of 100% of
Yeah.
the data.
So did you see any as you were walking around and talking to some of the AI vendors, Did you see any solutions that really caught your eye that were maybe really innovative or something that, whether it would be in, you know, managing patients around risk or maybe, I don't know, interoperability related to data or even how to manage some of the, I don't know, surgical processing that occurs, of patients in the ORs. Anything
Yeah,
catch your eye?
innovative. That's a tough word in my no,
Yes, it is.
because
Because if I
because
ask any of the vendors, they're going to say they're all innovative.
exactly, exactly. So listen, there are some very good vendors out there that are working hard on the toughest challenge in the market, and that is interoperability. Having been very involved with HIEs and even direct messaging during the MU2 days and beyond, it is the hardest part of the equation. So, but we still lack very significantly record matching, and we still lack total access to data, because I still have to go to the repositories, the common repositories, right? The commonwealths do a good
Mhm.
job. Care Quality does a good job. The QHINs do a good job. SureScripts does a good job. But I need them all and more if I was really to affect the effort that I was uh, trying to achieve here. So I still say that the market still has a long way to go on
Yeah,
the interoperability front. But listen, if I was around pre High Tech Act, and if there was ever and
sure.
I am not a government mandate guy, but I will say if there was ever a mandate, you got everybody's got to join QHIN.
Yeah, everybody's got to align. They have
Is
to
they
align
got to
around.
align, no alignment, no strategy, and then therefore no execution, and that ultimately hurts patient care.
If you're just tuning in, I am Daniel Marino. You're listening to Value-Based Care Insights. I am here reflecting on the HIMSS meeting that occurred beginning of March. Here talking with Tom Foley, host of the AI Shift. Tom, you had brought up one area, and I'd love to dive a little in because this is a focus that many physicians, many providers are really looking at in terms of augmenting their care model, and that is around patient engagement, empowerment, really the whole mobility aspect there. And there's been so much focus on the use of wearables, on being able to incorporate that into a lot of the care models that providers are looking at. Certainly, as you think about recovery and just getting more information there to the providers so they can kind of help the patients, through any type of condition that they have. I think some of that is also integrated with AI, but some of it is just standalone, right? It's just new technology. Were there some key areas there that you saw were kind of exciting around mobility, wearables, patient empowerment, any of that?
Yeah, I think we're getting smarter in this space, and because at the end of the day, we talk about outcomes,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and in order to affect outcomes, so that's another buzzword, outcomes. But the pathway to outcomes is challenging, because you can't get to outcomes unless you get to behavioral change first. And
true.
then
Yep.
behavioral change comes on recognizing that there's a compliance issue here, and change doesn't come without change.
Right.
Uh, but at the end of the day, change occurs when people start to be educated. So a wearable, a lightweight wearable, if you will. Maybe it's a ring, maybe it's a CGM device, maybe it's
A watch.
a
Right.
watch that is FDA cleared, if you will. There's a lot of watches out there that measure a lot of different things, but if you were in a doctor's office, you'd use an FDA cleared device, not anything else. So, but the point is that those data points now become, it's like a lab result. I look
Yeah.
at it.
Right.
When a blood pressure comes in, that's a result. It,
Mm-hmm.
it it might not mean anything. It actually might mean something in and of itself, but put it in context of trends, right? It might be within range, but if I did that over a course of time, I might see actually a curve going up, right? Everything's in a good range, but anticipating that there's an event going to occur is very powerful. So I think the whole remote monitoring model is becoming more mature in what type of devices that I use that are lightweight. I don't need a backpack to carry around a scale, a blood pressure cuff, a glucose monitor, a pulse ox, right? There are things that are lightweight and ride your skin, if you will, again through the use of like a ring or a CGM device or a watch, things that you
Well, and
already use.
that's a good point you bring up because, the wearables, if done correctly, will provide good data, right? And it'll
Yes.
support the trend. But where I see the intersection of data coming out of the wearables and artificial intelligence is the ability of AI to take that data, to aggregate it with other data, to allow some type of modeling, profiling, some type of proactive, you know, output or information that would allow us to become more prospective on that patient's condition, right?
Yeah.
Because the data from the wearable is important to your point, but it's trend data, right? And it helps you kind of understand where you're at within, different thresholds. But boy, if you can aggregate that with other conditional data, well, then you're at the point where you can actually become more prospective in the care that you're delivering.
Exactly. So as data drives intelligence, drives awareness. So and even drives behavioral change. If I was a patient and I started to receive these data points myself, I'd be more educated and be more and start to see a correlation between what I'm taking in and what my vitals are, if you will, right? But at the same time, AI is more like a health assistant.
Yeah,
Remember, we can't hire skilled folks in this industry, whether it be a doctor, a nurse, or any other certified resource. We can't hire enough, and we can't hire them fast because one, they're not there, but two, so how do we provide resources that reach out to the patient and says, "Hey, I got your blood pressure today, and it's a little high, hypothetically," and it reminds them maybe, hey, about smoking, about salt intake, about X,
right.
Y, and Z. Again, someone a very low cost modality.
Yeah. Other
Uh,
integration steps right there with some chronic diseases that provides even additional information or insights coming out of it.
yeah, exactly. So, and it might be, hey, did you take your medicine?
Right.
Yeah,
Well, I think
the,
this is where a
the,
lot of
the,
the AI bots are going to come into play, because
yeah.
they're going to be out there, almost reminding patients or providing additional information, as an output of that. And I'm sure, there was probably a lot of AI bot technology that was roaming all around, pardon my pun,
Yeah.
around HIMSS.
Yeah, so I mean, looking at even AI and medication adherence as an example, and remote monitoring, remote therapeutic monitoring, you can measure medication adherence. You
Hmm.
have, so this is where I think we just need to get smarter about how we're doing things. In the context of remote therapeutic monitoring, you're required to get 16 measures in a 30-day period, right?
Sure.
But studies show that you need to be 80% compliant on a medication for the medication to be effective. So if I'm only measuring 16 days, we can applaud and say, yeah, I was able to create a reimbursement. But the real question is, did the patient get healthier?
Right.
Right?
Where the outcomes there. Absolutely.
Were the outcomes there? So, and the behavioral change is to take it, your medications 80% of the time, because medication lack of compliance leads to 10 to 30% of hospitalization. That
Hmm.
alone is a huge cost saver to the market. Just taking your medications as prescribed, and we all know 30% of scripts are never filled.
Right.
50% aren't compliance falls off after the first 6 months. It just goes downhill from there.
Well, I'll tell you so I do a lot of work obviously in value-based care and helping organizations with care management and all of those elements. That's a part I'm really looking forward to. I'm starting to see some real traction there where you can look at some of the data coming out of these wearables, integrating it in with AI, and then creating it as, real actionable, if you will. I think that's where you're really going to start to see quite a bit of traction coming out of this, and folks will really take care of that. They're going to see the benefits of the technology changes.
Oh, absolutely. I think that AI is the and I might have some bias here, but I do think AI is the transformational
Hmm.
platform that will ultimately transform all of how care is delivered. It's not so much about what happens in the brick and mortar, what's happening in the home. It's how do I extend my brick and mortar into the home? And that is really where an AI agent that acts on patient engagement, and
Yeah.
it's more like instead of looking at it as urgent care and primary care, we need to look at the market as continuous care.
Continuous care, right? And that I
And
think has a big place to play, no doubt about it.
yeah, so if we can leverage AI to fill the gaps, AI is not about taking away jobs. It is
No.
not. I've seen it far too much. It doesn't take away. I've never seen a healthcare job taken away because of AI. But the point is that if we can use AI to fill the gaps where the human resources aren't available, we can really truly transform the way in which care is delivered.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So when you think about hymns this year compared to last year, um, what do you think has changed? Was there any different themes? Was there any different, I know even last year there was a big focus on maybe wellness.
Yeah.
I remember going to a few of the presentations there. Was that a theme this year, or did you see that the hymns leadership kind of reinvented themselves, and every year they kind of have a different theme based on where the trends are of the market? Anything come to mind?
Last year was a theme. It was themed on wellness, and certainly this year's theme was AI. If I were advising HIMSS, I might ask them to next year if they could talk about the continuation of care. It's about the overall care pathway as opposed to just wellness, as opposed to
Right.
just AI.
Well,
AI
maybe
in
they
and of
should maybe they should bring up AI wellness, right? Because we all may need some wellness around artificial intelligence.
Exactly. Well, so instead of there are those out in the market that are always criticizing the new thing. It might
Right.
be more so because it is new and there are risks. But in my experience, um, there's a lot more people approaching the use of AI in a most
Yeah.
credible way. And yeah, there's always distractors in the market. But let's leverage it in a most credible manner, and use it wherever it needs to be used. Frankly,
Yeah.
whether it
I
be
think a big theme in this next year, and if I was to give any advice to hymns, I would definitely focus attention around AI governance, the use of, the appropriateness of the use of AI and where it could be integrated. Because I think, in conversations that I've had with providers, they're struggling with that, right? It's like, how far do you take it? So that would definitely be a strong area of focus. And I know the government's looking at that. They're putting all sorts of new regulations in place.
yeah, and sometimes sometimes you got to let the market go and
Yeah.
to figure it out as opposed to rushing to put some
Right.
guardrails around it. Now there are if you're implementing AI, you're already thinking about safety. I would think.
Sure.
In my
Yeah.
experience, they are, and doing it much more rigorously. In my experience using AI, I have doctors that I was like, geez, I don't know if I would have asked that question, but AI seemed to have asked a very good question here, right?
Yeah.
So,
And they compliment you on asking good questions.
yeah, exactly. So it's
Make you feel good.
don't underestimate the power of AI in the
Right.
context of things that we're doing, and ask a
Yeah.
doctor who has worked with AI in the delivery of care what they think, because I do think that there are some leaderships in
Sure.
whether it be payers or there are some progressive payers out there,
Yeah.
which is a good thing. You know,
So
you always had this bell curve, right? You always you had the bleeders out there, right? And I think that we're kind of moving away from the bleeders to the early the early adopters, and I think we're going to start to see the tipping point where you know one, it's safe. You can use AI in delivery of
yeah.
care, and you can use
The
it in a big
appropriateness
way.
and where it kind of fits in.
Yeah.
As we wrap up here, obviously host of the AI Shift. Why don't you talk a little bit about just real quick your program and maybe how folks might want to get a hold of you or kind of link up with you if they have any other further questions. You're clearly an AI expert.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Dan. Yes, Tom Foley, the AI Shift. It runs on Healthcare Now Radio at 11 a.m. and 7 p.m. Each day. And if you're up at 3 o'clock in the morning, certainly take a listen then. You can reach me. My LinkedIn profile is T Foley, and it does have the program listed in the banner, so you'll know it's the right T Foley. So reach out. I'd love to. I always like to talk to folks that have questions or points of interest or perspectives that are different than mine. To me,
Well,
it's
I've listened into your program a couple of times and a number of times, matter of fact, and you do a nice job. You always
thank
have.
you. I appreciate that.
Well, Tom, we're out of time, but I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your insights related to HIMSS and AI, and love to have a further conversation about that. Maybe sometime next couple months or down the road. To all of our audience and listeners for tuning in, I want to give a special shout out and thank you for continuing to listen to Value-Based Care Insights. And until our next insight, I am Daniel Marino, bringing you 30 minutes of value to your day. Take care.
Thank you for being with us today. If you're navigating the shift to value-based care or looking to enhance the performance of your organization, we're here to help you move forward with insight and impact. Visit ecgmc.com to connect with Dan Marino and explore our advisory services. While you're there, check out our latest insights and thought leadership, follow us on LinkedIn, and join the conversation using hashtag VBC Insights. We're Lumina Health Partners, an ECG company. Until our next VBC Insight, keep leading the change.